Okay, here is case workout number 2. This is a moderate crowding case, and it's a little more complex than the first case. On this particular malocclusion, we're only going to be treating the lower arch, okay? We're not going to be treating the upper arch. Upper arch is actually fine. So, first we do is we click on Create Ideal Setup, and then the second thing we do is then now align the midlines, okay? So you can see here, I am just going to take this lower incisor and move it over so it is lined up with the upper midline. Take this lower incisor and move it over so it's lined up with the upper midline, okay? And that's where it becomes the basis from which all the other tooth movements are going to evolve from. Now I'm going to go ahead and close the upper. And now we're going to flip back up to the occlusal, and we're just going to go down our checklist of the tooth movement overview. First thing we're going to do is we're going to tackle the rotations, facial, lingual, and mesial distal corrections. So, and I'm going to start with the lower left central incisor here. And the first thing we're going to do is take care of the rotations. So usually on cases that require more tooth movement, I use the gyroscope just because it's much faster and more efficient. So I'm rotating this tooth around, and I also like to reference the upper sometimes to make sure that as I rotate it that we're still keeping the midlines on. So looks like the midline is on. Let's go back up to the occlusal perspective here. And let's continue to rotate that central a little bit more to get it completely corrected. Okay, next step is going to be to take the lateral incisor, move it distal, and move it facial until there's just a slight space. And then we're also going to rotate this, move it to where it's the approximate position next to the central there. And now, again, this happens 99% of the time, it seems like. We're going to take this whole segment here and distalize it. So I'm going to hold down the control key, select all the that posterior segment, and we're going to distalize. And you see here, usually on more complex cases, I'll enter in higher treatment values here. So I have 0.15 and 1.5, whereas on the previous case I only had 1 degree just because, or I had 0.1 millimeter and 1 degree. So as the case complexity increases, you're going to be moving the teeth further. So it just makes it a little bit handier in that each time you click on these buttons, you're going to move the teeth a little bit further with each click. Okay. Now I'm going to bring these teeth out facially. So we get that cuspid, the approximate location next to the lateral there. Okay, and again, we take this to what I call 90% corrected. Now we're going to move to the lower right central, and first thing we're going to do is rotate. And now we're going to move distal until there's ever so slight space there. Now we're going to grab this lateral, rotate, move distal here, or sorry, mesial, and I usually am keying off the lateral. So when I'm positioning this tooth here, usually I'm keying off the tooth over here to sort of give me an idea of the amount of rotation that is needed. Okay, now we're going to move to this cuspid, move it into position. Maybe add a little bit of torque to that tooth. And we just continue on around the arch here. So I'm going to grab this tooth, bring it mesial. This one, bring it mesial. And bring this tooth here and bring it mesial. Okay. Now, so let's just glance everything to see if there's any torque we want to correct. perhaps add a little torque to this central, or sorry, that lateral incisor. Again, it's not perfect, but it's close. We just want to get about 90% of to where perfection is. And the way I look at this is like golfing. Right now we're on the tee box. We're just trying to get to the green. So right now we just have our driver out, and that's what we're using. When we get close to the patient's closer to the finish, that's when we'll do all the fine tuning. Okay, so right now it's about just getting moving in the general direction, getting us in the ballpark. Okay, so now we're going to let's look at our checklist here, and so we've corrected rotations, facial, lingual, mesial, distal. We've also addressed the torque. Now we're going to do the tip, intrusion, and extrusion. So we wrap around in the facial, and again I like to start on one side, just rotate my way around, looking at each tooth. You can see if there's any sort of, this tooth here could probably use a little bit of mesial root tip, and this tooth could use a little bit of intrusion, and this tooth could use a little bit of distal root tip. Sorry, wrong way. Okay. And there is a height differential between this cuspid and that cuspid, mainly because I think of wear. This tooth has a lot more wear on it than this one over here. However, I'm going to intrude that tooth just a little bit. And these remaining uneven edges, I'd probably just do enamoplasty at the end when the patient was finished. Okay, so we are now done with this patient's setup. And now we're going to decide, referring back to our velocity guidelines, how many models we want to have printed for this patient. Okay, so again, we look over here at the chart, and I think the largest displacement that I see here is this, let's see, this is the lower central there at 20 degrees of rotation. So I would probably divide that over 10 models. So I'm going to click on create intervals, 10, click OK, and then now let's go back and review to make sure we don't have any values that are above our guidelines. Okay, so nothing is above 0.3 here, nothing is above 0.3 in this column, nothing is above 0.1 in this column. Rotation, 2 degrees is our highest. Okay, very good. Torquing, nothing above 1 to 2, and nothing above 1 to 2 in the tipping. So we're finished. Now, I would probably, on this case here, we have 10 different models. What I would do is I'd probably just have the first 8 printed. Take the patient through 8, the patient's tracking well, then come back in and fine-tune the finish here, or you can also take an impression and finish up that last little bit of tooth movement. Okay, a lot of times I'll take another impression. The reason why is because it doesn't matter how good the impression is or how good the scan is that you have, as teeth are unraveling, there is certain surfaces of the teeth that when we were back at the beginning, let me get back to the very, very beginning here, that you just don't have access to. The scanner can't actually map that surface. The impression material just can't get into it. Okay, so for example, these two teeth right here, doesn't matter how good of an impression you have or how good of intraoral scan you have, you're never going to get the actual two surfaces there. So many times what I find is towards the end, it's so much more efficient and you'll get a much better result if you just take a scan or take another impression and finish them out. So in a case like this, I'd probably get up to about deliver the first maybe eight setups, and then I'd probably at that point take another impression or rescan the patient and then take them all to the finish with maybe 1 or 2 more aligners. Okay? Hope that makes sense, and I look forward to seeing you in video 3.